Welcome back to the world of Eichard, where we learn how to think like the College Board. Today, we'll look at some exam examples relevant to Unit 4. Let's look at this set from the CED. So we have a set of maps here. Let's jump right into the questions then. Which of the following historical developments most strongly contributed to the mapmaker's depiction of West Africa in the southern half of the world in Map 2? First, let's make sure we're looking at the right map, map number 2. Now, Africa looks a little bit weird in this map, but West Africa actually looks fairly accurate. And we see in the map's description, it's from the 1490s. So we should know that by this point, Portugal is well on the way to setting up its trading post empire on the West African coast. So A is already looking like a good answer. B doesn't make sense because Zheng He was an Indian Ocean guy, and that doesn't include West Africa, although he did go to East Africa. C might be a tempting choice because Europe was isolated in the time before this, and was still isolated from much of world trade even in this time period. But they weren't isolated from West Africa. In fact, it's really only Europeans and West Africans that are involved in ocean trade in this area by this point. So actually C is definitely wrong. D is also outside the time period. This doesn't happen until the 1600s, and we can't give the Dutch and English credit for knowledge of the African coast. That came before with the Portuguese. A historian would most likely use map 1 to research which of the following developments in the period 1450 to 1750. Number 5 might seem a bit tricky. A could be tempting because this is from Italy, but we can't tell from this map who sponsored it. Plus, the College Board doesn't even care about the Renaissance for this course. B looks a lot better. Why? Firstly, because we know from topic 4.1 that we are required to know about how Europeans were influenced by Islamic scholarship, particularly in cartography. And this is a map, so cartography is quite relevant. And the map includes many cities in the Muslim world. So B is definitely better than A. Eliminate A. C is outside the time period. The Crusades were earlier, plus they weren't against the Ottoman Empire, and it's just not relevant to this map. Eliminate C. D is wrong because this map doesn't indicate anything about the Russian expansion into Siberia. Number 6, I think, is the most tricky. Which of the following factors would contribute most to future revisions of Map 2? Hopefully you can eliminate A, since the Mongols are from Unit 2 and outside the time period. You might want to pick B because Europeans do indeed get more involved in Indian Ocean trade in Unit 4. But then again, most of the Indian Ocean trade maps had already been understood pretty well by earlier merchants, like Arabs and Malays. Let's not eliminate it quite yet. How about C? You might think it's not relevant since this map doesn't really include trans-Pacific or transatlantic stuff. But look closer at the source. What is this map supposed to be? It's a world map, but it only includes Afro-Eurasia. Don't you think world maps would look quite different when you include the Americas? And it was the voyages mentioned in choice C that led to the future inclusion of the Americas in world maps. And when you consider that the question asks you what would most change future maps, it's now quite clear that C is better than A. This is a classic example of the need to both read the question carefully and look at the source material closely. Part D should just be obviously wrong. Mr. Eichard, what about the SAQ that we never finished from the Unit 3 review? Okay, let's wrap that one up quickly then. For parts A and B, just go back and check out that video. Explain one historical situation in the period 1450 to 1750 other than the one illustrated in the passage in which states in Asia or Africa adopted policies to limit European political or cultural influence. So we just need an example outside of Japan. I'll volunteer. One state in Asia that adopted a policy to counter European cultural and political influence was the Ming Dynasty in China. The Ming restricted Portuguese influence to coastal cities like Macau, as well as placing restrictions on Christian missionary activity. Like the Tokugawa shogun, the Ming government attempted to reduce the cultural influence of the European Christians and the political expansion of the Portuguese trading post empire. I got one from what we just reviewed. One African state that adopted policies to counter European influence was Matamba. Under the influence of Queen Njinga, Matamba was a powerful kingdom in southwestern Africa that used its military power and alliance with the Dutch to limit the expansion of the Portuguese colony of Angola. Matamba was thus able to resist the political influence of the Portuguese Empire by maintaining its own sovereignty. Glad you both remembered the ACE format.